Alright guys, it's time for a pop quiz. Who holds the record for the longest relief appearance in the history of Major League Baseball? Well, if you don't know the answer off the top of your head, don't worry too much about it. I mean, this is as obscure as it gets. The day was June 17th, 1915, and the American newspapers were filled with awful war news from Europe. The major leagues were at war as well, as the Federal League continued to put salary pressure on the American and National League clubs. 1915 really wasn't that long ago, not quite 110 years ago. I mean, in some senses it wasn't that long ago. It's not like I remember 1915. In a baseball sense, though, it was ancient history. Bert Humphries started for the Cubs against Brooklyn that day in Chicago. Humphries came into the game with a 3-2 record. He sported a microscopic 0.59 ERA, which was good for 1915, by the way, dead ball era or not. However, after Humphries got 2 men out in the top of the first, he took a ground ball off of his pitching hand. And so in came the 24-year-old relief pitcher Zip Zabel. Who was Zip Zabel? Well, he was drafted by Brooklyn, ironically enough, in the September 1913 minor league draft, what we now call the Rule 5 draft. He was traded to the Cubs as soon as he was drafted. Zabel pitched in 29 games in 1914. He posted a 4-4 record, mostly in relief. Along with that, he had a 3.16 ERA, which wasn't too bad. He came into this relief appearance with a 4-win, 4-loss record and a reasonably low ERA. And boy, oh boy, did he pitch well. Zabel got those Brooklyn hitters out inning after inning. Brooklyn scored the tying run in the top of the 8th inning on an error and a double that made the score 2-2. Zabel then proceeded to prevent Brooklyn from getting another hit until the 15th inning. And that 15th inning was nothing short of sensational. George Cutshaw opened up the top of the 15th with a single. That was the first hit again Brooklyn had had since the 8th inning. Zach Week then laid down a bunt, which of course was common in the dead ball days. Third baseman Art Phelan charged the ball, and then it slipped out of his hands as he threw. Cutshaw ran to third safely, but Week was thrown out trying to advance to second. Casey Stengel, yes, that's right, Casey Stengel, that Casey Stengel. Casey then walked, setting up runners on the corners. Up came Otto Miller, who was the backup catcher. Miller came up and smacked a single, scoring the go-ahead run, and a large pro-Brooklyn contingent in the crowd cheered. The Cubs managed to get out of that inning without any more damage being done. And then, in the bottom of the 15th inning, first baseman Vic Sire smashed a home run to the right field bleachers to tie this ball game up 3-3. Wow, Vic Sire. Now you would have to be a real diehard Cubs fan to even know that name. Did you know that Vic Sire hit 14 home runs for the Cubs in 1913, 18 in 1914, and then 11 in 1915? He wound up breaking his leg in 1917. He then went to work in a defense plant instead of sticking with baseball, and he was never quite able to break back into the big leagues. It really is a shame. I mean, this guy was out hitting Babe Ruth, and I'm dead serious. Both teams had good chances late to win, but failed. Finally, the Cubs won it in the bottom of the 19th inning with runners on first and second and 2 men out. Cy Williams hit a ground ball to the right side that second baseman George Cutshaw fielded. However, Cutshaw's throw to first slipped out of his hand. It went over the first baseman's head and allowed the winning run to score from second. And so, the Cubs won this one 4-3 in 19 innings after 3 hours and 15 minutes of baseball. By the way, all before darkness fell. Now, as impressive as Zabel's relief performance was, we really shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the Brooklyn pitcher, Jack Pfeffer, pitched the entire game for Brooklyn, all 18 2/3 innings. Yeah, the entire game by one pitcher. Zabel's Sabre biography claims that he suffered from the physical toll of pitching this game, but that's not true. Zabel took a week off, sure. He then pitched fairly well for the rest of the season, including throwing multiple complete games. Meanwhile, for Brooklyn, Jack Pfeffer continued pitching until 1924 when he was 36 years old. Seems to me that throwing 19 innings didn't do him any harm at all. Now, it is true that Zabel left for the Pacific Coast League in 1916, but this wasn't because of arm problems. This was because new manager Joe Tinker was upset with Zabel for his habit of showing up to spring training late. Zip never pitched in the major leagues again. Zabel's minor league career ended in 1917, but you need to understand this isn't because he couldn't pitch, it's because he had a chemistry degree. He got a job with Fairbanks Morse up in Beloit, Wisconsin. And so much for that idea that this long relief performance somehow injured his arm, made it so he couldn't pitch anymore. But there is one other story about Zabel that I really have to share with you. Zabel loves sports like so many of us. He wound up serving as the only referee in the football game, that is American football, between the Green Bay Packers and the Beloit Fairies in Beloit at the end of the 1919 season. Now, the Packers in 1919 had just been formed. They were an independent professional football team that played against other teams in Wisconsin. This is back when there were a lot of these barnstorming professional teams. They had posted a 10-0 record up to that point and had allowed only 6 points all season long. During this game, Zabel called a controversial holding penalty on Green Bay's first drive. That prevented an early Packer touchdown from being scored. There was another very controversial call when Beloit had the ball right before halftime. He gave them the ball on the 1-yard line. Now, the official timekeeper stated that time had expired, but Zabel, who was the only referee, ruled that there were still 5 seconds left. Beloit scored, going up 6-0 after missing the extra point. Zabel then made a very controversial forward progress decision sometime in the third quarter that negated another very large Green Bay run and potential lead. The crowd, meanwhile, was constantly encroaching the field, threatening to end the game early. Beloit ended up winning this game 6-0 in what was almost certainly the most controversial game in the entire history of the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers did attempt to arrange for a rematch that December, but ultimately were not successful. Well, I bet you weren't expecting that kind of ending, were you? I've got a feeling that Zabel wasn't exactly playing fair when he officiated that Packers game. But you know, what's done is done. He sure was a heck of a pitcher, though.